Hello, welcome to another episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. Hit me up on Twitter, NGH287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. The website is dsmsports.net, where you can find every episode as well as more content, and the podcast is available on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. Got an awesome show for you guys today. I was so excited for this interview, and it went really well. Just so many good insights and stories and anecdotes and lessons and takeaways. And just we don't get to dive in this area as much as I'd like. My guest on the podcast today is Evan Parker. He is the CEO of Mantel. Mantel is the social platform for collectors of all sorts. Sports obviously is a big part of it, which is germane to this podcast. But everything under the sun. Just on the app today, I was just scrolling briefly this morning, and there's MLB, there's NFL, there's golf, there's Marvel, there's NBA, there's Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan memorabilia, just so many interesting things, and you're gonna get into hearing about how these communities really engage, come together, what it's like starting a platform, learning about how different sports fans engage with their collectibles. Why is collectibles a valuable and continuing to grow industry? What makes something worth collecting, and why are we so attached to these things that are otherwise not worth the cost of goods? Ultimately, as Evan will say in this interview, these cards are just they're pieces of plastic, pieces of cardboard, whatever it might be, and yet they are worth sometimes hundreds of thousands or millions in some cases, and they drive such passion, such community, and there's so many good lessons here for anyone in the greater marketing, business, sports space as well. So listen up, here he is, Evan Parker, CEO of Mantel. Back on the podcast with today's guest. I'm so excited to be talking to him. We could have been just recording the last 10-15 minutes already sharing some knowledge. My guest on the podcast today is Evan Parker. He's the CEO of Mantel. And welcome to the podcast today, Evan.
Thanks for having me, man.
So psyched to speak with you. You are building Mantel, which is truly a hub for collectors and the community of them. I mean, I'll let you describe it more yourself. So, but before we get in the meat of our discussion, tell us all about your career path, all your stops along the way, and then certainly leading up to launching Mantel.
Well, I think it's probably similar in a lot of ways to basically everybody who listens to this, Neil. Like, I wanted to be in sports, and I wasn't going to make it as as an athlete. So I found late in my college career that there was a whole business side of this industry that as a fan you kind of don't know exists. And so I was able to work for the now Washington Commanders, different name at the time, in their PR department when I was in college, and I worked at a TV network in DC as a cameraman, and I was through that kind of learned that there was a PR department, there was a marketing department, there was content, there was all these things, and that's how I got into the space. And I worked at Edelman, the PR firm, for 6 years. Worked on Xbox 360 and Pepsi and Clorox and a bunch of brands that have relationships in the sports space with their sports and entertainment projects, and then went to NASCAR. Did 8 years there. My last job in NASCAR was leading content for the sport. That's where you and I first interacted, I think. And then was at the Athletic. And help the Athletic go from mid-size startup to something that the New York Times thought worthy to buy for $550 million, and worked for the Times for a year. And then that turned into Mantel. I was looking for something different to do. I felt like I had one or two big swings left in my career before I felt like I needed to settle down a little bit. And an opportunity popped up that I could partner with Alexis Ohanian, who built Reddit, Brent Montgomery, who's a huge TV producer and entertainment exec here in LA and New York. And Mantel was the idea to build a social network, a community and content platform for people who collect. And it's sports cards, it's memorabilia, watches, whiskey, stamps, coins, whatever people are into. We felt like there was a lacking in the market for a place for people to go and meet others who cared about the same things that they cared about, get deeper down the rabbit hole, spend more time on the things that give them passion, knowing that every social network now goes out to a broad audience, has politics and war and health and religion and tariffs and whatever it is. And if you go on those platforms, you get a lot out of them, but you also end up getting distracted. You get triggered. You have all these different emotions that maybe sometimes is good, but sometimes you just want to avoid. And if at the end of the day, you're looking for a place to go just to focus on something that you're passionate about, a niche community, a niche idea, Twitter is not the place for it. Instagram's not the place for it. Reddit's not the place for it. Could we build something that could just be for that audience? And we thought that it was a worthy business to try to build.
It's been so cool to see the growth of the product and to see people saying like, I can't believe this is, I've been waiting for this my whole life. And I can't believe I'm so glad I found this. And those kind of things are awesome to see. And it's cool to also see this, I guess, a it's a truly social network where like you're actually connecting with other people around a shared interest. Whereas other social platforms maybe have become less social over time, more broadcast or broad based, entertainment based. So that's a whole other conversation probably.
Yeah, I mean, we really wanted to go after the niche and say, okay, like if we were going to build this, what is a community? I think, you and I are close in age. Like the message boards that existed in the early 2000s still exist in these communities, and so people are going on to something that has no features built for the topic. It's mostly text based. It's hard to search. It's hard to interact. It's hard to really. They don't have native apps, and they're just not great products. And so a lot of these communities exist on something that when you go on, you say, "Oh my God!" Like there are thousands and thousands of people, and this is how they're interacting. This is the technology that you're using. There has to be a better way. And we're not going to try to go compete with Facebook and with Instagram and all those other major platforms. We can't. But can we create something just for one of these audiences and pull them not away from Facebook necessarily, but pull them away from the message board, pull them away from a Facebook group, pull them away from an email newsletter? Can we try to bring them together in something that feels a little bit more built for 2025 than built for 2005?
Yeah. I want to take a step back and kind of more macro as well. Just as we've just heard about your career path as well, like you start out behind the camera, literally, and then developing the oversight of content with NASCAR, and then that sort of more that strategic GM role with the Athletic, and now of course the CEO of Mantle. So how have you kind of evolved your idea of how content connects to an overall business? Like when you think about, I mean, even your time at Edelman for that matter, when you think about how content leads into the marketing objectives, the overall brand that you're trying to create, and so how have you started to understand how the actual day-to-day production of content overall relates to those overall business big picture objectives?
It's funny. It's a little, in some ways, it's a lot easier than it was when I started my career. In some ways, it's a lot harder. I started at Edelman in 2005, and Twitter didn't exist. Facebook was obviously a very different thing at that time. It
Well,
just had
Facebook
launched.
then.
Right. It just had launched, and it was, just for college students to connect to each other. MySpace obviously no longer exists. So a lot of the social networks that were Reddit was just being built at that time. There was no such thing as YouTube. We didn't have like the creator economy. We didn't have a way for people in the community to actually create content and be a part of the conversation. It was a lot coming from the brand, and PR, traditional PR was a huge part of that because you only had a couple of ways you could do it. You could throw an event, you could do PR, you could get into an article, you could create something that gets on TV, and that's kind of where it stopped. I mean, we were like in the early days of blogs. And at Edelman, a lot of my work was pitching traditional media,
Yeah.
magazines, things that you pitched, and like 2 or 3 months later, you'd see the fruit of your labor. Whereas today, you get an idea, and we're like, we got to write this thing, we got to post this thing, we have to interact with somebody, and we can also work with the community. But what I learned really early on with Xbox, especially when I was at Edelman, is that there were these communities that already existed that could become your most important constituent. You can't talk to everybody, right? There's only so much reach that any brand has. But if you can talk to the right people and they talk to their friends, they talk to their communities, you're able to expand that way. And it's a lot easier to go pitch somebody who already loves what you're doing or is already interested in what you're doing than it is to go pitch the New York Times and try to get them to write the article that you wish that they would write that's going to get read by all these people. And so I think that content, what I learned really early on before social media was really a thing, was that the community was the best way to go build a business. And if you could get people to love what you were doing and be evangelistic about what you're trying to build, you have a shot at doing something pretty special. And I think at all my stops at NASCAR, we created content. It was social, but it was trying to go after who are the NASCAR fans, who are the people who love this already, who can interact with what we're doing and who can help us build. And at the Athletic, it was all right, we got to go after these sports fans. And so we're going to have, a beat writer in this area who's going to go work with people who truly care about this content, and they're going to help us grow, and they're going to tell their friends, they're going to share the articles, because if we go write some amazing piece about, your Padres or my Dodgers, then maybe people are going to feel like they have to read it because their friends are reading it, and that's going to help us grow. And that's what we're trying to do with Mantle. Like, collectors exist. They don't always know other collectors. They don't always know people who love what they love, but they're all over the place. And so can I get you to go talk about it to your friends if you go tell two people that you just had this conversation about sports cars, and it's gotten you to go back to your parents' house and open up, your binders and go look at what you had as a kid. Maybe it gets you back into it, maybe it gets them into it, and little by little we can grow.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that there's so many things like floating around my head as you were going through that. Like, you almost think about the like Malcolm Gladwell and the tipping point of like who's
Right.
going to lead things and what makes something become bigger and of course the idea of word of mouth being the most powerful way to market anything. And one friend tells another friend, and it snowballs from there, and everyone brings themselves to the table. And then even just the idea of the old way of gatekeepers and third party
Yeah.
media, and you have to get through those few like legacy publications that are no longer quite as influential as
Yeah.
they were on their own. But I want to sort of touch on a little bit of like when you do work with that community, when you do kind of look to others to help kind of co-create and tell your story along with you, like how much of that is a little bit of give and take of like, well, we want to like this is the messaging we want out there. This is the brand perception we want. I mean, I'm thinking especially about with NASCAR, even with the athletic, or and certainly with Mantle even today, of like this is what we want out there. So therefore, we want to sort of massage the way the community is telling our story. Otherwise, it can sometimes get out of your control, and then sometimes there's messages that you don't want out there. So, how do you kind
Sure.
of like balance those things?
It's tough. I mean, the easy way that a lot of brands do it is they pay influencers to help tell their story, and then they can message with the influencer exactly what they want to have said. We're not in a financial position to do that. I also don't think it necessarily is what's going to build Mantle to the way that we want it to be built.
Mhm.
So we're not out there paying influencers to be part of our content. We're just trying to show people what we're working on and let them come up with their own ideas of how they like it, how they use it, and hope that they're going to share it with people that way. So it's give and take. There are going to be people who we talk to, who we interact with, who we get to create content because we're talking to them and we get them excited about something. But then once they hit record on their phone, it's out of our hands, and I don't know what's going to come out there, and I don't know if I'm going to like it, and I don't know if they're going to say the thing that I would have said or the way I would have said it. But that's the good thing, I think, in the end, because then it comes across as being authentic, and it comes across as being relatable. When I worked at Edelman, Edelman has something called the Trust Barometer. Every year they do this
Yeah,
gigantic study, and they interview thousands and thousands of people to figure out what creates trust. So like, why would you and I go follow a brand and go buy something, buy a product? And they use it. It's a good content mechanism for them, but it also helps inform some of the ways that they interact with clients. And a few years back when I had already left Edelman, but I read it every year. The thing that people trusted the most, and it shifts every year, was like people like you, right? Like you're not going to listen in the beginning. It was our parents, maybe it was the newscaster. It was Walter Cronkite or something for our grandparents' age. It
yeah,
was a politician. And little by little, people are trusting the institutions less, and now they trust more the people like you and I. And for a while, that was our friends, and you trust your buddy to tell you what to do. I think now it's turned into that you trust people who seem like you and I, but they have influence, right? So it's a podcaster,
yeah,
it's a creator who feels like I could be friends with this person, but they're saying something with this megaphone that you and I don't necessarily have. And so, we're trying to find those people who have influence, but they're just regular people. And you have to just do your best to say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why it's exciting to us. This is what we're trying to accomplish, and hope that they feel that same way. And I think the good thing about what we're doing with Mantle is that it's a passion, right? It's collecting. It's something that should bring joy. And if I show my passion for collecting, if I talk to you about why this is cool or what we're trying to do, my hope is that you walk away from it and saying, oh yeah, that is really cool. Mantle is a good idea. And you're just more predisposed to then tell your community that this is something that's worth checking out.
yeah. And the shared passion points and just an area of where it's I'm trying to think of any negative potential, but it's a mostly positive stuff. And like you said earlier, a little bit too, with some
Yeah.
of the older social platforms that there's a lot of cesspools there as well.
Yeah, and look, there are in the collecting world too, right? There are trolls on the internet in every corner. That doesn't keep collecting is part of that too. There are trolls in the collecting world. There are also a lot of different reasons why people collect, and some people are into it specifically for money. which is not a bad thing necessarily. But if you are buying a card because you want to flip it and get more money out of it, and I'm buying it because I love this athlete or I want to hold on to it forever, means that we have different motivations, and the things that you care about or the way that you care about it could be different than me, which can create some tension. There's jealousy. There's all like you pulled a card that I wish I had, and so there's a lot of that, and we're really trying to build something that's positive. It's what we spend a lot of our time on, frankly, is just how to make sure that Mantle is a place that people go when they want to get into the things that they love and have civil conversations about it. Doesn't mean I have to love everything that you love,
Mhm.
but my hope is that we build Mantle into a way that if you post something that I don't care for, I just click to the next post. Or I say, hey, Neil, that's cool. I would not, I don't want the Tony Gwynn card that you pulled, but, like I'm glad that you like it. Whereas on Facebook and other places like that, they might say, you're an idiot. Why did you get that? You wasted your money. And we're really doing our best to try to make sure that Mantle is not like that because I want this to be positive. Look, there are easier ways to spend your time and money if you don't enjoy it. It's a hobby. It's something that should be fun. It's something that should add value to your life, which means that the platforms created for it should add value to that passion, to that hobby. And if we can't make Mantle make you love collecting even more, we've screwed up. We haven't done our jobs.
Let's double click into the old overall picture of collecting in general. You alluded to it before. I had it in my pre-show notes as well. Like when you break down kind of these segments of collectors, you have like you said, your fans, your investors, your curious people that people like me, even who like I'm not a heavy collector, but I will definitely read a story about a really cool collectible, or I'll
Yeah.
watch a YouTube video or watch a video about something that's a really unique. So as you started to learn the collector community from a truly a business perspective and like as you were building Mantle, what does that breakdown look like, and how does it vary maybe across sports, across fandoms, and even across geographies if relevant?
It's interesting. It's one of the few hobbies that I can think of that, I'll go to a sports card show, for instance. You've got 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds, and they like the same stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
it really goes across generations. And at the same point, you've got people who are collecting a sports card that was made in 2025, and people who are buying cards that were made in the 1800s, or like so it really spans. Every fan base is different. But it brings people together in a really interesting and cool way. I also think if you look at collecting as a whole, stamps and coins versus sports cards versus NFTs versus watches or cars and things like that. It's a lot of different communities within this. There are people who are in it for the money, who are flippers that buy things and they're trying to. It's an investment for them potentially. There are people who sports card breaking is huge now, and so there's a little bit of a gambling aspect that I'm going to spend a little bit of money to buy into a sports card break. Somebody's going to open the cards and I'm going to get whatever comes out of that, and I'm putting my money out there, and just like you'd be going to the casino and putting money down on black on the roulette wheel, like I'm hoping that this card gets pulled, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you end up going through a whole break and you spent $50 or $100 or $400 and you got nothing, and sometimes you get some card that's worth a ton. So there are people like that. There are people who just collect what they love, that these are things that they never hope to sell. People who love opening cards, people who love buying singles. So it's really interesting. And what I love about Mantle is you see these communities start to pop up, right? So you see somebody who's posting about card breaks, and there are people who are going to gravitate to those posts. Hey, I did this instead. This is what I love. Oh, that's amazing, whatever. And there are people who totally stay out of it. That's not the way that they collect. And so if somebody else is going to post and say, this is something that I've had in my collection, it reminds me of my grandfather and I'm never going to get rid of it. And there are people who gravitate towards that. That's the way I collect. That's amazing. What a great story. And so on Mantle, we get to sort of see it. It's almost like all these little rivers kind of coming together, and like they're coming out of the ocean of collecting, but then they sort of splinter off, and maybe they cross over in different places, and they go away from each other in different places. But all of these people are kind of in it for their own motivation. I think what kind of connects people though is the excitement of it, and like the feeling that it brings, the nostalgia or the connection to these athletes, the stories behind it. We really are trying as much as we can to make sure that people are not just saying, here's a card that I pulled, but here's a card that I pulled and this is why it's interesting to me, or this is what I'm thinking about, or here's a question I have about it. Like, can we get one level deeper? Because if Mantle just became a platform where you just took a photo of your card and you posted it, I don't know, I got it on my desk, got this in a break. It's a Juan Soto. It's probably a $10 card. But if I just put this up there and just said Juan Soto card, there's no content, right? There's no that doesn't bring you to the next conversation. It doesn't make somebody want to interact with that any more than just the fact that there's a card, right? But if I post this and say I was on a break, I got this from Grand Salami's break, and I didn't want the Mets. I was hoping for the Dodgers, but I got this. But it's Juan Soto. He's a great player, but it's interesting that Juan Soto, because he's played for the Nats and he's played for the Padres and he's played for the Yankees, played for the Mets. His cards are relatively affordable given the fact that he's a future Hall of Famer. And I get into like, oh, but the Dodgers last year and Soto playing in my Dodgers in the World Series. Like now there's meaning to it. And
Yeah.
there's something for you to jump into as a Padres fan to say, oh, well, this is what he was like when he played on my team, or this is why I like him or don't like him. And now we have conversation and we can go back and forth. And it no longer is just about the card. It's about sports. It's about life. It's about money. It's about fandom. It's about all these other things. Because at the end of the day, man, like this is a piece of cardboard.
Yeah.
Like you got to think of how silly this is. This is a piece of cardboard with a photo of a human being on it who's playing a child's game, essentially, right? Like there's nothing about this that is interesting or should be worth money until you get to like why this stuff is always important to us. So you get to like the root of why you and I love baseball and love sports and love collecting or cards or all these other things, because it connects you to your grandfather or the town that you grew up in or this moment that you had, whatever it is. Like if you can get to that, to like the core of collecting, you've got something special. But if all you're talking about is this is a piece of cardboard, like the materials in this are a couple of cents. There's nothing about this, right? And so like that's what we're really trying to do is how do we just break it down to the reason why people are interested in this? Or if you're not interested in it, what's the thing that we can get you interested in? Because I really believe that everything that exists, that's like every physical item, every digital item, there are communities that collect it. There are people who are interested in it. And if the story is interesting, there are people who might not care about it at all, that topic. But because you told an interesting story, it's like, okay, I don't want to go collect that myself, but I really respect that you do. I'm really excited that I learned about that. I know more now than I did yesterday because collectors, I think, by nature are curious people.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the aspect of like these are things that carry stories. Like you think about, like I'm a baseball history nut, so I think about like the T206 Honus Wagner famous card, and to me that conjures up the story of like, well, at least the old tale goes, and I might be wrong here, that he didn't want his name and likeness to be associated with a cigarette brand, and therefore there's only so many cards of those that are out there, and that became one of the most valuable cards in history, and.
Yeah.
And I love that it's an invitation to tell stories. If you are a collector, you have tons and tons of stories to tell when people ask you about your collection. Why is it meaningful? Yeah. How'd you get this? And as you allude to, there's endless opportunities there to really talk about what it means to people.
The Honus Wagner example is one that I use all the time because if you think about the card, so 1909, the T206 series comes out packed in cigarettes, right? And to your point, there are like two stories about it. Either Wagner didn't like the fact that his brand, his name was associated with cigarettes and didn't want kids to smoke, and so he wanted it pulled out. And then there are people who believe that it was that he wasn't getting paid for it, and so it was like the earliest NIL story. And he said, "Hey, you're not paying me, like then I won't take my name out." So either way, right? Now, if you talk to 1,000 baseball fans and you ask them about Honus Wagner, and you say, "Tell me the team he played on." Tell me when he played. Tell me what position he played. Tell me what he did that was interesting. Most people, even baseball fans, are not going to know a lot about him, but they're going to know the card. And I think it's because of the story behind the card. It's not the rarest card that ever existed. I pulled in that same break. I have this Luis Angel Acuna card. It's out of 10. This card is rarer than the Honus Wagner T206, but this is probably a $200 card, something like that, right? Whereas the Wagner, you're not buying one now for anything less than a few $100,000 on up.
Yeah.
It's not that rare in comparison to sort of the manufactured rarity of cards today. Wagner is not known today for anything that he did. There's no video of it. It's not like you and I are watching his highlight tapes. He played, he's a really good player. He's in the Hall of Fame, but it's not like he's the best player to ever play his position. He didn't, like there's so much about it that doesn't make sense other than when you get into the fact that people decided back in the early 1900s that there was something about this thing that was interesting and that they coveted it and they told the stories about it. Now you hear all these reasons why this card it was owned, the one that Wayne Gretzky bought and the one that was altered and the one that was sold for this amount of money and that had this grade and that every year there are the National Sports Card and Collectors Convention, there are like dinners that get put together. People, the only way you get to go is if you own a T206, and all this stuff sort of builds this intrigue. And now it's this card, more than 100 years after it debuted. It's a card that people who never watch sports, don't really care about baseball, they know that this card is interesting. And I think that's sort of the magic of collecting, but it comes down to storytelling and community because the community decided that this was the card, not other cards from the T206 series. Not there are older Honus Wagner cards than the T206. We've decided that this is the one, and to me that's special. I've got, it's hard to see, but on my mantle over there, I've got a T206 Honus Wagner. It's not a real T206 Honus Wagner. It's a reproduction that was made in the 90s. I spent probably $15 on it. But I have it up there because it represents something about collecting and about storytelling and about community that I think is really important.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to afford the real one, but that one helps kind of illustrate to me why what we're building at Mantle has the chance to be something really powerful because we can bring people together and to tell stories and to build community that can transcend in the same way that card has.
And you talked about how like there are people that are in the collectibles community that even own sports cars that may not even be fans of the sport or may not know much about it. So like, when you think about it from like a sports property perspective, like what did NASCAR think about collectors, or what should MLB think about collectors, or what should teams think about collectors? Is it an opportunity to engage a potentially very diehard fan base, a community that can interact with your team and ultimately become a evangelist or more connected? Like how do you think? What should that perspective be, and what's your perspective even from the Mantle end?
Yeah, I think that teams need to be spending more time thinking about how to create things that have interest beyond when it gets handed to you. A team will spend a lot of money, putting towels on every seat for a playoff game, and at the end of the playoff game, half of them are still in their seats. Somebody will bring it home and it'll end up as a dish rag. Somebody else will put it on their wall, but it kind of loses its appeal at that point. But if you can create something that has lasting value that somebody wants to show their friends, wants to post on Mantle or another social network that might have, like monetary value down the line, I think it just kind of anchors you to those moments, to those teams, to those athletes in important ways. And I think teams have gotten away from it a little bit. Tickets is a great example of that. When you and I were growing up, there was only physical tickets, and you could save every one that you ever had. And some of them were from games that only meant something to you because you went with a buddy and you had a good time, and so you have that ticket, and you got to like look up on the internet to even see what happened in that game. But others are from moments where you go and you say, "Wow, like this is the game where this thing happened." And if you had the foresight, and I didn't as much as I wish I did now, to hold on to all these things. I went to a lot of games that afterwards the ticket gets crumpled in your pocket or whatever, and you get thrown out, lost, and it's not, I don't have them all anymore. And I wish I did, but now I get to go to, through my job, I get to go to some cool events, and I end up with a thing on my phone that has no value. It's like in my Apple Wallet, and
Right.
at the end of the game, it's gone. I don't do anything with it. And I think that teams can be a lot smarter about how they create those moments that can, hold on to. I think, last season the Dodgers did, they do a ton of bobbleheads. They did one for Ohtani, and they had a limited edition gold one. And people were lined up for hours, and they were selling them for thousands of bucks. Like that's the kind of thing that yes, there's a monetary aspect to it, but trying to create this extension of the game so that there's something that you hold on to, something that you covet beyond that moment. It's also a revenue opportunity for these teams that I think that they're missing. Even tickets, if you were able to just spend a little bit extra money and get a physical ticket for the game that you just went to, I think that there's a segment of people who would be doing that every single time because those tickets could have meaning to them or money down could be worth something down the line. And I think that in a world like today where there's so much to distract you, there's so much that people can spend their time and energy on. Every day there's 1,000 games, and everybody has access to more games than they can watch. There's social media, there's movies, there's all this other stuff that you could be doing with your time. I think that sports teams should be thinking more about how we can make people interested in the event beyond just coming and watching 9 innings of baseball or 4 quarters of basketball. And I think collectibles can do that.
Hell yeah. I mean, there's something to like the idea of even like, I mean, you can't see it in my screen now, but on my desk, I have some bobbleheads that I've collected over the years. And,
Right.
and those are those, there's stories associated with all of them. But I think more importantly, it says something about my identity. And
Yeah.
I want people to know I'm a Padres fan. I want people to know that I'm, a
Yeah.
single Wave fan. And having those things to display are helps showcase that. Even having like a pennant up in your room, like, will showcase
Right.
that. You and I could learn a little about you just by going through all your collectibles that are visible
Yeah.
here. And so there's something to that aspect too of like, and even when we're going through the digital phase of collectibles during that craze, which we'll get into a little bit later, of having things you can display on your Instagram profile that
Yeah.
you own can say something about you. So I think there's certainly something to the idea of collectibles also serving as a way to showcase your identity and also be a conversation starter with people that even you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what you're doing on Mantle, of course, is being able to have the opportunity to meet other people with like interests, and all of a sudden you have that icebreaker to make a new friend, I guess, potentially.
Totally. If you came into my office and you looked at that at what's behind me, you'd get a pretty decent picture of what I cared about, what I was interested in. I don't want everybody coming into my office. Mantle allows me the ability to show the things that I care about, the things that mean something to me, and to connect to other people because of this shared interest, in an interesting way that I think it allows you to find community and find people who like the same things that you like, or can turn you on to something that you didn't know previously existed or was cool.
And I think something interesting too with like the aspect of the endless Otani bobbleheads and all the long lines for them, of course, and you see people waiting and to post them on eBay or whatever. The idea of a sort of manufactured scarcity to some degree. I think if you look back in the early 20th century, people didn't think that the cards are going to be worth this much someday, so they didn't do much with it.
Right.
My dad will tell stories for days about how he used to have like mantles and mays, and but he put them in
Yeah.
his bike because it made a cool sound, and now and then
Yeah.
my grandmother threw them all away, and we would have been millionaires otherwise.
Right.
And now you have like, I guess, card companies and other organizations that are like, we're gonna try to create that single Paul Skeens card with a game used pack in the first game,
Yeah.
because that's how we make a 1-of-1. That's how we create that scarcity. So like, what is your POV kind of on that? Like, is scarcity the main like determinant of the value of a card, and how do collectors, even the collectors community, think about this idea of these card companies creating 10 to 10s or 1 of 10 because they need to create that scarcity in order to
Yeah.
uplift the industry, I guess.
It's a great question. I think that what Fanatics is and Tops are doing now, I appreciate. So that, you talked about the Paul Skeens, the debut patch. That's manufactured scarcity, but also it's not, in the sense that he had one first game and
Right.
he had one jersey, and so there's one patch. And now that's a card that yes, they decided how many of them they were going to create and how they were going to create it, what it was going to look like, and all of that. But there is an element of it that like, how many ways is he going to have like 1,000 patches on his jersey? It's, he's not an NASCAR driver. So there's some, but this like Luis Angel card, I have this Acuna. This is manufactured to some degree, right? They decided we're going to make 10 of them. He signed thousands of cards, and they all sort of look the same, but this is a 2 out of 10. There's a 5, there's a 1 of 1, there's a 50, there's a 75, there's a 150, right? And so I think some of that people can feel like, all right, this is a little bit BS. You just decided that this card is worth something because you put a number on it, but otherwise it's identical. You think about like the 52 Topps Mickey Mantle card, which is, aside from the Honus Wagner, it's probably the number one or number two most valuable sports card in the world. That one is limited because they weren't selling all that well, and the story goes, at least that Topps had all these extra cards and they dumped a bunch of them in the Hudson River, and so there just aren't that many of them in comparison to other cards. They're not the most rare card. Again, there are hundreds of them out there, probably more. But they're worth a ton of money in good condition because at the time your father put them in bike spokes, and Topps threw them in the Hudson River, and other people threw them against the wall or traded them or threw them away, or their mothers threw them away, or whatever. And that card doesn't exist in the same way. I think that scarcity, limited edition, brings another element of it that makes it so if there are 50,000 of the same thing, it's hard for any of the 50,000 to be worth something because you can
Right.
just always go buy something. So you need a little bit of scarcity for it, but you also need it to be interesting. It has to stand out in some way. It has to be about something that matters. A 2 out of 10 Luis Angel Acuna card is not nearly as valuable as a 2 out of 10 Fernando Tatis or Shohei Ohtani, right? Like, who's the athlete? Is it a cool set? Do people think it was an interesting time period for the sport, or the way that the card looks? Does it have the right IP? Right now, there's this whole war going on in the sports card space between Panini and Topps and signing athletes, and so you might get a Panini baseball card that doesn't have the team logos on it because they don't have the IP, but Topps does. So there's the same card, the same autograph, the same limited edition. One becomes more valuable because of the IP. So there's a lot of that goes into it. But at the end of the day, it's like what do people care for? What do people care about? And sometimes it's hard to describe. It's just that this thing is popular for whatever reason. It was co-signed by the right people. It had the right marketing campaign. It looks cool, whatever. And I find that there's somebody out there for every card. You don't want to go spend your whole life selling dollar cards on eBay, but there's always somebody who wants it. They're completing a set.
Yeah.
They're doing something with it, and so there's always somebody out there who's looking for everything out. Every certainly in the card space, every card somebody's looking for.
Something you said earlier that has certainly fascinated me, and no doubt during the NFT bubble, which is not necessarily going away anytime soon, digital collectibles, but the idea that ultimately these are pieces of paper, pieces of cardboard that are, on their own, if you just add up the value of the content itself, like it's not worth much.
Right.
It's materials, and yet it's what we ascribe them to. And so as like the sort of digital collectibles craze was taking off, it really forced us to take a step back and think about, well, why do we value these things? Like, why do we value what is the value of a JPEG versus the value of a piece of cardboard? And like, what does that mean? And so as you have learned more about the collectible space, both in and out of sports as well, like what have you sort of taken away from what it like? Is it the idea that there's sentimentality? Is the idea that because like ultimately the value is because people ascribe value to it, and there's a market that develops around them, and you have things that feel like they're scarce. I don't really have a set question here, but it's trying to understand, like, trying to really wrap my head around this new age idea of what makes value, what makes something valuable, when really at the end of the day, like anyone can go and reproduce it.
Anybody can go, but at the end of the day, it's about willingness to pay in a lot of ways. Like, what does somebody think it's worth? It's no different than a house or a car or something like that. Like, this is worth $1,000, $10,000, whatever, because that's what I like about it. That's what I'm willing to pay for it. NFTs are interesting. I think that NFTs got hurt a little bit because of the crypto craze and how quickly they grew. And so people didn't have a chance to really understand what they were or why they're important. You were either in one of two camps. You were in the camp that said, this is stupid. This is just a JPEG that, they can reproduce 1,000 times. It's, Top Shot. Like, I don't own this, the NBA owns the highlight. I have this little clip and anybody can go get it on YouTube. What does this mean? And then there's this other side that saw like, oh, I can go open up packs on Top Shop highlights and I can go buy, whatever Bored Apes and these things are going to be worth tons of money. And I don't have to care that the Bored Ape looks this way or whatever. It's just, can I make money off of it? Mm-hmm. And those two things happening at the same time created, I think, an unhealthy dynamic where NFTs were either worthless to some groups or only about money to other groups, and there wasn't enough people in the middle who truly loved this thing because they loved it, right? Like, at the end of the day, you're always going to have baseball card collectors that are going to love it even if they can never sell it, because to them it connects to something. And I think the NFT world didn't have a chance to just organically build true like fandom and appreciation for the object, because it was either this thing that you scoffed at or something that you tried to make money off of. I'm curious now, as NFTs are starting to come back a little bit, are they going to be done in a more sustainable way where people are shown why this is cool, why this matters, why you should care about having the item on the blockchain, or why you should care about the fact that you got this cool artist to do this cool thing? I think it's giving that whole world a chance to reset. And even if it is manufactured scarcity, even if it is just a JPEG, even if it is something that you and I could both have the exact same highlight, yours is an approved licensed version, and mine is just a video on YouTube. But I think the more education that goes into it, and the more people just start to really love the digital object, it'll only help that world, I think, thrive.
Yeah, even when you mentioned like the special meeting of T206 owners at the National Sports Card Convention, and my first thought was like, it's kind of like the exclusive events of Bored Ape Yacht Club collectible. Yeah. It's a membership, it's community that you have because you all own a certain verifiable thing.
And it's hard to discount what happens over time. We care about certain baseball cards have been around for more than 100 years. Now we grow up and it's something before we know about money, before we have any, trade, all that stuff. Like, we're liking it because it was like our parents liked it, their parents liked it, we ended up liking our friends, and then now we're older and we have this connection of more than 100 years worth of this history. It's rare, like we get to see NFTs. They didn't exist, and then all of a sudden they existed. We're older, we could say, does this make sense, does it not? Like, so I just think that maybe had you and I been around in 1909, we would have had a different perspective of the T206. This is stupid. It was in all these different, you could go buy a pack of smokes and get this card. Honus Wagner was good, but who cares? There was all these other players, whatever. Walter Johnson was in that set. But we weren't there then. So we're now sort of like just inheriting these stories that took place before we were alive that have helped shape our worldview. Whereas with NFTs, we got to make it ourselves. We got to decide if this was something I was going to go buy, go to Dapper Labs and buy a Top Shot, or I was going to skip it. I was going to go buy a Bored Ape, or I was going to skip it, or a Doodle, or any of these other things. Like I got to make those decisions. I got to make my opinion. Do I trust putting my money into this thing, and is it going to make sense? And I just think that we're in this weird world now that things are moving so fast, and we have a chance to see these communities start and stop. The number of things since 2000, since the pandemic, that like spawned and died is unbelievable. Whereas you look at the 5 years before, I don't think that there was even a fraction of that. So I just think the world is changing at such a high pace, and people are skeptical of it because they want to say, okay, is this thing going to be around? Am I just going to buy it because it's a get rich quick? Or is there a chance that I'm going to really care about this in 5 to 10 years? And if you're building a brand in the NFT space, I would be thinking about, how do I make sure that this is something that people are still going to care about down the line, versus how do I make sure that people are going to just go buy and trade these really quickly? I make my money, I disappear,
Right.
and all these people are now left with something worthless.
Man, this is such fascinating stuff. If 4 minutes left here with Evan Parker, CEO of Mantle. You also have me like going through the 1909 Pirates in my head now. I want to be like Pie Trainer and Archivon or whatever. I'm a baseball
Right.
player, like I said. I want to touch on like, and I even think I spoke about this with you when you were first launching Mantle, of like, it was really what really did feel like right place, right time. All of a sudden, whether it was because of the pandemic, people had time, people had money, whatever,
Yeah.
that there became this huge craze in all of a sudden the collectible space just started like becoming bigger and bigger than ever, it seemed like. And you had like platforms like breaks became a thing. Platforms like dApps and became a growing thing. And all of a sudden it was like, well, yeah, now it seems like the best time than ever to create a platform like Mantle. So like, how, first off, did you recognize that, and was that part of the impetus for you and your team to decide to launch that? And how did you go about launching that platform, understanding what should the product look like? Should it be a bunch of short form videos like TikTok? Should it be live videos like and a bunch of breaks? Should it be like
Yeah.
like a Reddit type thing or a group play? And how has it sort of evolved as you guys have built the product out?
So the original idea came, Alexis and Brent have known each other for years through business, and they had discussions. Brent created the King of Collectibles show on Netflix with Golden Auctions, and he Pawn Stars was his first big hit from a TV standpoint. So this is a guy who understands the collectibles world from the lens of content primarily. He's a collector himself. He grew up selling baseball cards, but his business has been on the content side of collectibles. Reddit had collectible communities, so Alexis knew it from that. But he's also a massive collector himself. He owns the largest collection of Serena Williams items. He's got a bunch of stuff from when he was growing up in the DC area, from the Washington football team, and all these things that he collected over the years. So these are two guys that understood the community, and Alexis has some. And both of those guys have investments in the space, and I think that they realized that there just wasn't something that was filling this niche. There wasn't something that was kind of occupying the space. I've been a collector my whole life, so when I was put in touch with them and started talking to them about the idea, it was like, all right, well, this is something that I spend my time and my money on when I'm not working. So would be a great thing for me to get to spend my career sort of focused on. And when we launched, or when we came up with the business plan, it was a debate every day. Should this be video? Should this be a content company? Should we create similar to what Darren Rebell's created with Collect? Should this be journalism, or should this be community? Should this be events? We went. If you look at the earliest decks, there's 1,000 different things that were just thrown out there. Could this be Mantle? And ultimately, we thought that you have to to do any of these things. Building the community makes the most sense to start. Like, get people interested in what you're doing. Creating high end content when you don't own the platform is a hard thing to create a business around in the way that we were certainly a venture backed business. So if we can't focus on the content first, because nobody's going to watch it without distribution, how do we create a platform that can then have people who care about these things so we can talk to them every day and build something that they really care about and love. But every day, the team and I sit there and we say, like, all right, what are we focusing on? Does this thing that we thought made sense still make sense? Did we do it the right way? Are there other ideas? I apologize to my team every day because I just feel like there's whiplash. Like, hey, we got to do this. We got to, oh, you know what? Actually, this is more important. No, this is the thing we have to focus on. We can't actually do that until we do these five things. And we have a roadmap, and if the roadmap was written in pen, it would just be a bunch of like X's out, start here, do this. Oh no, we actually made the right decision to start. And every day we're really trying to figure out if we're on the right path. Did we build something the right way? Can we make it better? And if the answer is yes, great. Let's launch it and get it out there. If the answer is no, let's figure out what we need to do about it. Can we launch it and just let people play with it? I was telling you before we started talking, it's all MVPs, right? It's like, what can we launch today that's as close to good as possible? But if we wait 5 more days to make it even better, we've now wasted 5 days that we could spend building something else, and then we can let the community tell us what they love. I know it's a little bit cliche, but I say all the time that we're not trying to build this for the collectibles community. We're truly trying to build it with the collectibles community. If you go to Mantle right now, and I don't know when this is going to air. It may not be up there at that point, but the top post is pinned, and it's a survey to our users asking them what they, how they're using one of the elements of our product, one of the features that we've built, because we want to know. And if the community says, yeah, the thing that you built doesn't work for me, I don't like it. This, I wish it had this, I wish it had that. We can take that data back, discuss it as a group, and decide: do we want to go in the direction the community said? Is there consensus? Did we get a better idea from it, or did we make the right decision to start? And if we just decided, here's exactly what it's going to be like, we were going to spend years and years building this thing in secret. It was going to be this stealth company, and then all of a sudden we were going to say, hey, here's Mantle, and it's millions of dollars invested and years of time, and then we gave it to you and you didn't like it. We've just ruined the entire company. The money's gone, the time is gone, people don't like it, and we didn't have that ability to get the feedback. So we've really tried. Every week we're going to launch something. We're going to ask you, do you like it? We're going to meet with you. We're going to say, hey, what's missing? What do you wish that we had? And a lot of times they tell me, they tell us the exact same thing that we thought. We didn't even need to talk to them. What we were building on is what they wanted. But every once in a while, that's not the case, and it's really valuable to get that feedback to help us shape it. And it's also very valuable for our community to feel like their voices are heard, that they can reach out and they can say to the team, I wish you could do this, I wish you could do that, because we don't have that ability with any of the other social networks that we use, right? Nobody's calling Zuckerberg or Musk and saying, hey, I really wish you had this feature. And nobody on my team is Zuckerberg or Musk. I'm not making that comparison, but we are at that stage as a company that you can give us feedback that you can then see show up in the product. And I think for a lot of people, that's really cool.
No, totally. It kind of goes back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier around just like co-creating with your audience and
Right.
not forcing something, not forcing a point of view or a perspective if it's not meeting what their expectations and what their needs are. And
Right.
I wanted a couple more quick things before the server stay. I promise I can keep you all day, Evan. And that is kind of what have you found that has moved the needle early on as you've gone through these growth processes, like whether it's a piece of content that really went viral or something that attracted the really avid collectors that brought with their communities with them, or influencers, and also the alongside that, how do you balance the idea of like we want to attract the casuals who may not be avid collectors and looking for something like this versus we want to make sure that we focus on getting that core audience first and then get the periphery later?
It's a question we wrestle with every day. We need people who are willing to post and willing to engage. If you think about most social networks, 98% of the people who are on those social networks never create any content. They may not even like posts, right? But they're lurking, they're reading, they're paying attention to it. But if you have those 98% and you don't have the 2% that are going to create meaningful content and engage, the lurkers have nothing to read. They bounce. You never see them again. And so we have to spend a lot of our time trying to find people and convince them that you can go post this exact same thing on Twitter, where there could be hundreds of millions of people who have the ability to see it, or you can post it on Mantle and thousands of people will see it. If you post it on Twitter, you're going to get instant feedback, likes, comments, whatever. If you post it on Mantle, you might not. But here's why posting on Mantle makes the most sense. This is why we would love you to help us build this thing and help us tell the story, and eventually you will be an early adopter. You will be a first mover. You will be able to reap the benefits. If this company is successful, if this platform grows, you'll be one of the first people there. You got the
Yeah.
right username, the thing that you wanted that you couldn't get on Twitter, you got on Mantle. You were able to build your audience early when some other people were sleeping on it or didn't even know that we existed. You can help us shape it. You can give us feedback. And if you can create content, then we'll have other people come in who see that and say, oh, I can do this. I can create more content. Collectors are an interesting bunch. I mean, in some ways, we're a nostalgic community that in ways lives in the past, which is not a good signal for early adoption in tech. You think about what you need as a social media network, what you need as a tech startup. You need people who want to be on the cutting edge, want to be there before it's ready, want to use a product before it's even good. And if you're somebody who loves collecting sports cards that were created before you were born, you might not care as much about being on the cutting edge because
Yeah.
you love the things that have already happened. You love these physical goods that maybe are bring you joy in a different way. And so we have to go out and find people who are interested in being a part of something that is not as easy. Posting on Mantle, engaging on Mantle is harder than posting on Instagram because we're all now 15 years into using those platforms.
Mhm.
You wake up in the morning and you open your phone and your thumb just happens to find the X logo or the IG logo, right? Like it's not even intentional. And to get you instead to click on the M logo, to click on Mantle, means that you have to be intentional right now in a way that you
Yeah.
don't with other things. And so that's always going to be tricky, and it's going to take us a long time before people just have that habit where when they wake up in the morning, they want to check us first, and they want to be on our platform. They want to create content. When they get a great card or a cool watch or something, they think, I want to go tell my friends on Mantle. I
Yeah.
don't want to go tell my friends on Instagram. But that's not something that can happen overnight, and we constantly have to work on it, and we constantly have to backfill our community because people will join. They'll say, okay, hey, there's not enough people here, or I forgot about it. I stopped using it for a week and I've moved on to something else. And so how do we make sure that every day there's a new crop of people coming in who can energize it, who can create more content? And so that's something that we're always trying to figure out. We don't have a great way to do it. We haven't like cracked the code yet.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Sometimes it's a piece of content. We had a story that ran on KTLA, not local news. It's not something that I thought would have made a difference. We didn't pitch it. Somebody that a collector was on the show talking about sports cards and what they loved about them. Somebody who we're close to, who's a creator and influencer in the community. The reporter wrote a blog about sports cards. Mantle was just mentioned once. It wasn't even about us, and we saw a spike. This
Yeah.
thing that I never would have expected would have mattered to us. Okay, so like it's just another PR hit, but the reporter was talking to an audience who happened to care. It was a tech audience that was like, hey, this is interesting. I want to go check it out. We'll go to an event and we'll see a spike because we were at the LA card show. We had a contest to guess how many cards were in a box. And if you guessed, you won a prize. It's not, brilliant marketing. It's nothing that was huge and all that well thought out, but we saw a spike. An Instagram post goes viral. You see a spike. Somebody posts about it organically and tells their community. There was a woman who was posting on Twitter a lot last week. She used Mantle. I don't know how she heard about it, but she liked it. She posted about it to her couple thousand followers. She's not an influencer. Doesn't have a great size audience. But the people who follow her for a reason and like what she does, and they saw it, and so we saw a spike because she was talking about it organically. Some of those things you can really plan for and you can try, and some of it just happens to be a little bit serendipitous,
Mhm.
and then you have to just pounce on it. You see that opportunity, you jump, you do everything you can to keep it going as long as it can.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we do fails. We spend a lot of time and energy on things that nobody sees and cares about because it just didn't work the way that we hoped. And then something that you didn't spend any time on or you didn't think about happens to move the needle. I'm hoping over time we get better at predicting. Or our mutual friend like Nick Cicero and Mondo Metrics, like he's been dissecting some of the content we've created, and we're hoping that coming out of that allows us to be a little bit smarter about it and make better decisions. But a lot of this is just taking swings and just trying things and hoping that it works. And if it doesn't, pivoting and making sure that nothing that we do takes too much time, energy, and money. So if it doesn't work, it's okay. Like failure is sort of the name of the game here. Everything that we do has a better chance to fail than it does to succeed. And that means that we have to take a lot of swings. A baseball player who gets 3 hits out of every 10 at bats is going to make the Hall of Fame. That's kind of the way that we're approaching it. Like, you're not going to, if you only take 3 swings, you're not going to get to the Hall of Fame. So let's make sure that we're always taking 10.
Yeah, and I love that the where you guys are right now, where every incremental user does matter, and like never know what the K factor is going to be of
Right.
this next user, and it's going to snowball. And the more and the
Right.
sort of not economies of scale is the wrong term, but that network effect is truly at play.
Yeah.
For you guys, so I love that aspect. I'll tell you one last thing for sure was that Evan, something that continues to stick with me. I don't know why. Just it was one of the cooler things that you guys wrote about on Mantle and was posted was like I think it was the bullet casings from Bonnie, like a Bonnie and Clyde like gunfight. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, what the hell? And
Yeah.
so I kind of wanted to use that as a jumping off point to ask you, like, what besides sports has started to really grow within the collectible space on Mantle and beyond, and how have you seen those fans interact in a similar way as sports collectors, or in a different way?
It's funny that you brought that one up because you had told me you were going to ask me about some of my favorite content, and that post is at the top of my list. I mean, a user who joined over the last month has an insane collection of non-sports stuff, some sports stuff too. And he had bullets that were used by Bonnie and Clyde. He had a bank receipt that had blood splatter from Bonnie and Clyde. I have no idea how he got this stuff. It's just, but you look at it and you say, I mean, this is history right here. This is something that was, we all know who Bonnie and Clyde. It's crazy that we know who Bonnie and Clyde were because they were bank robbers. It's just there's
Yeah.
so many like incredibly important people in history that you and I would have no idea who they were, and we know about these two bank robbers. But he owns something that they used, and I find that really fascinating. I learn more from the non-sports people on Mantle than I do from the people who collect sports stuff. Because I live and breathe sports. I've been a sports fan my whole life. I've been working in it for 20 years. I see cool stuff, but the T206, somebody in the community could have it, and well, like I don't want to brag, but I've held the T206 before, right? Like, I like, okay, that's really cool. It's amazing. But I've never seen Bonnie and Clyde's bullets before. I don't know how much they cost. I don't know where he got it. Like, but that's the kind of stuff that like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Somebody collects that. Somebody finds that cool. And every day somebody posts something that is from a category that I don't really understand, that maybe I don't know anything about. Wouldn't collect it myself, but I look at it and say, like, okay, this is a piece of history. This is something that's connected to something that's a little bit different. We wrote about, Pope Francis died, and there's signed baseballs out there that he signed. Like, that to me is really interesting. This is like, it's unexpected. There's a sports connection to it, but there's also a history connection to it and a religion, and it's all this stuff comes together. And that's why I really love what I get to do. I mean, getting to build Mantle and getting to work on it is fun every day. But the stuff that really gets me excited is seeing the things that get the community excited, because that's why I'm into it. I love to go to a museum. I love to go to shops and see things that I've never seen before. And I get to sit at my desk all day and just see this endless stream of content of people showing me their personal museums, the things that get them excited. I don't have to leave my desk. It's like the Smithsonian is just kind of like constantly Cooperstown, the Smithsonian, all these things that exist on my screen 24 hours a day because the community is so passionate about the things that they're interested in.
Is it fair to say that, like, where there is fandom, there are collectors or
Yeah.
collectibles to be had? Like, I think about, like, in the last 10, 15 years, or maybe even lesser, I might be out of it, with like the growth of K-pop and the whole interest in that fandom space.
Yeah.
And does that mean like there's probably a nascent industry for collectibles in that space? Like, I want to
Absolutely.
get a T-shirt signed by BTS or
Oh,
whatever. I'm just
absolutely.
here a little bit.
And certain things that weren't collectible at the time become collectible. There's somebody who posts frequently on Mantle who collects band T-shirts from the 1990s, and he'll have like Nirvana shirts that you or I could have bought when we were in middle school. You go to like the Hot Topic and buy this shirt, and now they're selling for thousands of dollars. That these things that weren't valuable at the time cost 30, $40. Most people threw them away or they got worn out or whatever. And now that there's this audience that's like anything that exists today, it's if I was smarter, I'd be thinking about like what is something that doesn't have a lot of value today, but if I held on to it, it would. You think about iPods still in the case, that you could have gotten these things that like, oh, somebody gave me an iPod, it's still sealed. I don't need it because I already have something that I like, and I'm listening to a Zune instead. So I'm just going to put the iPad over here, and like all of a sudden, that's now worth thousands of dollars. And having that ability to kind of see everything that exists and say, this actually right now doesn't mean anything to anybody, but there's something about it that tells me if I can keep it sealed, if I can keep it protected, if I can hold on to it, maybe in 10, 15, 20, 50 years, this little item of mine is going to be meaningful and it's going to be worth something.
Yeah. Oh, I love this stuff, Evan. We can go longer and longer, and we will have some more fun with you in our mantelpieces segment. First episode, shareable stat, coming up right now. Just fantastic stuff being able to talk to Evan Parker, CEO of Mantle. Really loved hearing about, what it's like growing the platform, what to learn there, what there is to learn about these communities, and what drives such passion, what drives such engagement and activity, and really some good lessons and takeaways as well for folks that work in the sports space, and how you can really leverage these opportunities to amplify fan identity, amplify these communities that are already forming around collectibles, and certainly the emerging digital collectible space, and just the ability to create memories and create stories. That these are not just tokens; they're invitations to tell stories, invitations to have memories, and the sentimental value. Just so much good stuff there. But stick around because we're having some more fun with Evan with our quick hitting question segment. But first episode, shareable stat. This episode, shareable stat looks at the prevalence of DM sharing, of sharing stuff through private messages, and it came from Meta. It is looking at the fact that there are 63 times more private messages sent than public posts. So for every one post, there are 63 private messages. That is that might even be understating. It's probably even higher for the younger audiences, the younger demos as well, who just live in their DMs, live in their group chats as well. And just a lot to take away from that. I mean, certainly, yes, we talk a lot on this podcast around what does success look like on social media, and where does value come from. It still oftentimes does come down to the number of engagements, that's likes and comments, but certainly shares and sends are just as important now, because those are starting conversations elsewhere in these darker social platforms, the earned media aspect of it all as well. And oftentimes too, to be able to think that the success of a post is not just dependent on what's happening with that post publicly, how many comments and likes that it has. It might be driving tons of more intimate, more engaged conversations that are outside of your view. And so really think about, when you're looking at the success of an overall social media strategy or just an individual post, from post to post, is this something that we expect some people to share, offline, and have discussions about in their DMs, or something that we do expect to have people, commenting more publicly because you're asking for it, or something that people should be double clicking or double tapping to be able to like. And sometimes stuff that doesn't get as many likes might be driving more conversations, might have more sends. What does your ratio look like from likes to sends, or to shares, or comments to shares? And what does good look like in that sense? So you can really start to get a feel for what is driving these sort of more darker, these private post conversations. Where does that sort of correlate positively with the more traditional engagement metrics? Where does it correlate negatively, or not to use the term negative, but in a different way, to what the other correlations may speak to? So a lot to talk about here. Certainly an ongoing subject, but really interesting to put the stat behind it. And that shareable stat is 63x. There's 63 times more private messages sent than public posts posted on Meta platform. So talk about it, think about it, consider it, ponder it. More importantly, though, stick around because we're gonna have some more fun with Evan Parker, CEO of Mantle. Right back in this episode, Shareable Stat, and I am joined once again by Evan Parker. He's the CEO of Mantle. While we were breaking for the Shareable Stat, I was rummaging through my in the back of my shelves and trying to look for cool collectible pieces. And I even told Evan I was able to find an old school Game Boy. So sign me up for the old school Nintendo collectibles communities. I'm sure there's plenty of opportunity there. But Evan had so much fun picking your brain in the interview segment. Are you now ready to go through some Mantle pieces?
Let's do it.
All right, number one, you talked a little about your time at Edelman. So tell me the most memorable client project or campaign from your time working with Edelman.
It's easy. I was able to work on the Xbox 360 launch. 0 hours, the first event. It went okay. There were a lot. I don't, if you remember the Red Ring of Death, all these Xboxes that were getting bricked. So it had its share of stress, but at the time it was the biggest consumer product launch in history. At least that's what we said. And it felt really cool, like you were on the cusp of something, getting to release this product, and as a fresh grad from college, getting to touch something that all of my friends cared about, everybody was interested in. It's a hard project to beat.
Heck yeah. What's your go-to game for Xbox 360? What was?
I loved Gears of War. I thought that was an incredible game. Played that all the time. I'm a sports game guy though, so Tiger Woods golf and Madden and NBA Live, like those were the games that I gravitated towards most. But Gears of War, as somebody who didn't grow up kind of playing, the RPGs and first person shooters and stuff, that wasn't the type of game I played as a kid. That was like the first game that I ever completed. It was Gears of War.
Love the nostalgia there. It's such good stuff and lots of fun to work on. Number two for you, Evan. Tell me, you're CEO at Mantle, leading a startup company there. So tell me the biggest lesson you learned so far in your time leading Mantle.
I think that it's always a little bit more lonely and harder than you assume that it's going to be, but also brings more joy and cool moments. And I hope that I am slowing down enough during it to remember some of this stuff and to learn and not just continually move. You like especially because it's a social network, 24 hours a day, there is stuff happening on Mantle, or I want stuff to be happening on Mantle. There's not a moment you and I are talking, and I'm not looking at the feed. And there's always this low level of anxiety that I have that there's something else I should be doing, could be doing to either help goose conversation, give people a good time, bring more people onto the platform, make sure the wrong things aren't happening. And it's all consuming, and you hear about that a lot. And until you get into it, it's hard to sort of truly understand what that means.
Yeah, it's got to be like you said, it's probably both gratifying but also just it truly is. There's any free time you have, any free headspace you have, you're probably thinking like, what can I be doing to help Mantle or to help grow it, or what am I missing out on? It's
Yeah, it never stops. It really never stops, and I think that you have to really want it. You have to know what your motivating factor is. What is the reason why you're doing this? And it can't just be that you want to make money. It can't just be that you need a job. It can't just be that you're doing it and you don't want to not do it because, like, hey, this is my what I do for a living. You have to really want this thing to succeed because it takes more out of you. I worked a lot of jobs, really hard jobs that took a lot out of me and took a lot of time. And I think about them now, and they were easy in comparison to what I'm doing. And to put yourself through this every day, the uncertainty, the stress, the decision fatigue, all these things, you have to love it, and you have to really feel like it's a worthy endeavor. That what you're working on is important enough that it's worth the time and effort that it'll take to make it really good.
Oh yeah, I love that answer. That I want to just put that on a poster board and reread it every day. That's super inspirational. Number three, going back to your time at NASCAR, tell me your favorite content that the team produced during your time in NASCAR.
We did so, my job at the end of my last role was all I did was content. And so there's so many examples that we did on social and graphics and NASCAR.com. We did a web series with Bubba Wallace on Facebook, Behind the Glass, that I think it was Behind the Glass. That I felt like it was early in when Facebook was starting to buy content, and it felt like we were blazing a trail, that we were creating something that was TV worthy, but it was going to be distributed through a social media platform. And I think that that's something I learned a lot during that process, and we got to make something that I think also had lasting value, lasting power.
That's a good one for sure. I remember some of that Facebook content back in the day. Number four, a couple of quick hitters here, or a few quick hitters. Within number four, I wanted to cram a lot of questions into one. So tell me, A, the country outside North America where Mantle has resonated the most. B, the two sports. So I with the most avid collectors. I'm kind of conceding that baseballs are going to be one of them. So the two sports, the most avid collectors, and then C, the non-sports category with the most avid collectors, and then finally the non-sports category that you think has the most potential for Mantle. So country outside of North America, two sports, the most avid collectors, non-sports category, the most avid collectors, non-sports category that you have high hopes for.
I mean, sports by far on Mantle. I mean, that's where we launched. So my whole team comes from the sports world. So like sports is what we focus on. Basketball and baseball, I think, are the two that have the deepest communities. Basketball, from a modern standpoint, I think that they've done the best job with star power, and so there are these players that you get to see that you really care about. Could anywhere from Giannis to SGA to Jokic or whatever. Like these are people that people really care about and get to see. So basketball has a huge community, and what Michael Jordan did with to kind of put basketball cards and sports cards on the more modern map. There's, if you think it's like T206 and Mickey Mantle's cards, and then it's like the Jordan rookie in terms of things that really truly matter and transcend. But baseball is up there too because baseball has so much nostalgia and so much history. I think from a non-sport standpoint, Pokemon by far. I've never seen anything like it. I go to card shows now, and 3 or 4 years ago, I'd go to a card show, and there'd be a couple of tables that would they'd be selling TCG. They'd be selling Pokemon. Now it could be the majority of tables at some of these events, and more people care about it than ever before. This card show I was at this past weekend, the kids that were coming up, like they bring their binders and it was all TCG and Pokemon, and they didn't care the fact that we wanted to talk baseball or basketball or football. Like that was the thing. So I think that's only going to continue to rise. In the sports side, I'd actually think soccer cards are just going to keep on growing as that sport becomes more global, as we in the US start caring more about the European leagues, as MLS and NWSL continue to grow, and then with the World Cup coming to the United States, to North America, I think soccer cards are ready to just explode. So Pokemon and soccer are the two that if you were just starting to get in and you wanted to kind of like, have some upside there, I think those are two to really focus on. And I forgot the last half of your question.
How about the non-North American country where you've seen Mantle and the collector community be the strongest?
Canada and the UK, part of that is because they English is the primary language, so that's part of it. But in the UK, soccer, Canada, hockey cards are massive. But Asia is such an exploding category, and so Japan, China, Malaysia, like we're seeing, less people join from countries where English isn't the primary language because it's a social media platform and communication is not always easy. But card shows popping up there, card events popping up there. And I think the interest, if you go to China or Japan, basketball cards are the coolest thing in the world there. And I think we're only going to see those communities get more and more embedded in this space.
So I'm sure on the long, long list of to do things, localized for Japanese, localized for all these languages, easier said than done.
Mantle's available. If you're in Japan, you can download the app. We wanted to make sure that we gave everybody the opportunity to participate, but we haven't figured out yet how to make sure that the content, is if you're reading about a comic book that you're reading about it in Japanese, we're not there yet. But at least if you're there and you speak English, you can read English, then we hope that you're participating.
Yeah. Number five, Evan, tell me the coolest overall collection that's been posted or discussed on Mantle, and the coolest individual item that's been posted or discussed on Mantle.
You and I were talking about the Bonnie and Clyde stuff. I think that's pretty high on the list. There's a few people on the platform that have whole sets that they've collected that have been all signed. So there's a guy who has the '86 Fleer, which is Jordan's rookie year, every single card signed by one of the players, and so you've got like signed Jordan rookies. That's amazing to see. There's a guy who was posting a couple days ago about he had signed stuff from Neil Armstrong and so it's just I don't know, it's such an impossible question because every day I see something that I'm really interested in, and some of these things are not attainable. They're unbelievably expensive, but there are also people on the platform that always get me excited because they've found ways to get deep into this collecting world without spending a lot of money. There's a user, a member who not Todd Zeal is his username, and he goes on eBay and he finds jerseys of like offensive linemen that played in the Senior Bowl or played in the in the Canadian CFL or something like that. And he finds these jerseys, and then he goes and he finds all of these moments, photographs, video, and is able to photo match the jersey to a certain, this was used to tackle this guy, and here's the blood or the dirt or whatever. And these could be jerseys that he bought for $25, $50, but you and I might just buy them and say, hey, this is a cool thing. Like I've got a pair of Kike Hernandez signed cleats, and I love that, massive Dodger fan. I love that I have them, but I didn't go and like look at the games to see when did he wear these and can I find the scuff marks on these cleats and match them to this stuff. But that's what this member does, and that brings a lot of joy to me because he's like, doesn't matter how valuable these things are for him. It's the hunt. It's finding this thing. It's doing all the research. It's being able to definitively say this was used in that way, and it just reminds me that there's so many different ways to be a collector.
Super cool. And there's got to be some AI potential in the future there to match.
Absolutely, there is already, but it kind of ruins a little bit of the hunt, right? Like if this stuff was easy to obtain, it would lose some of the value. Part of the reason why people love doing it so much, if you try to be a set collector and you've got to go find every card that came out, and there are people who are out there who are, scraping and clawing and trying to get, you see sometimes like a card will sell from a set from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and it'll sell for a ton of money. You never heard of the athlete. If you ever see something like that, you read an article that this card sold for thousands of bucks and you don't know who the athlete is, it's probably because people are trying to complete a set and there aren't that many of that player anymore because they weren't that good. People threw out the cards; they don't exist anymore. And if you want to complete the set, it's easy to find the Dominique Wilkins from the Fleer set, but it's really hard to find. I don't even know who it would be.
Right.
Some Jack Sikba or whatever, and like so you have to spend a little bit more time on it. And I think that as like technology and tools make collecting easier, it'll also rob some of the kind of like the joy in the hunt. And there will always be people who will say, I don't want the technology because the thing I love about this is that it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, there was some quote recently. I was listening to some stuff about Hermes, the famous bag brand, and
Right.
it said like we sell time, and like yes,
Right.
you can get a machine that can make manufacture these like 1,000 a minute,
Right.
but someone's doing this by hand using stitching from the 1800s, and we're selling
Right.
time. There's
Right.
something
It's not that I love that quote that the CEO said. It's like this stuff is not expensive. It's costly.
right.
And I think that that's part of it, that these things have more value because of how hard they are to obtain, to find, to authenticate, whatever it is. But the effort that you put in, if you could just go and like mail Nike a Jordan card and then it comes back a day later signed, Jordan autographs wouldn't be all that valuable. But because they're really hard to find, especially on his rookie card, they're incredibly valuable. And it's it's just there's manufactured scarcity and there's scarcity because it's really hard to find these things. And I think that that's part of what makes this such a fun hobby.
Ask a quick follow up there because when I was younger and we used to go to card shows, I was told and it stuck with me. Don't get that card signed because it's going to devalue it. It's going to PSA grading and all that. So
Yeah.
you get a card signed or not? Where do you stand?
Oh, I mean, it doesn't degrade the value of the card if the signature is a good, clean, good-looking signature. PSA grades autograph cards all the time, and the value just goes up exponentially. I mean, if obviously it depends. Some cards it doesn't make a difference. Athletes signing so many of them, it doesn't matter. But I have things on my mantelpiece that I bought specifically because they are signed. I got a few years ago while I was still alive. I didn't get it physically signed myself, but I've got a Jerry West signed 1972 Topps basketball card, and it was signed when he was a player. And that to me, like that makes Jerry West touch that card.
Yeah,
I could have the card that just got pulled out of a pack. That's kind of cool. But the one that Jerry West touched and signed, now it's something that I display. And I've got a signed Ken Griffey Jr. rookie over there, and I've got like these are cards that because of the autograph, they go from being a commodity to something limited and collectible.
I love it. Great information there for me personally, hopefully for our listeners as
Yeah,
well.
whoever told you that robbed you of a ton of value in your collection.
I need to go back 25 years and tell them to
Yeah,
get
right.
it. Number six, tell me, excluding the launch day, and you maybe allude to it with the KCL story, the biggest day or week of growth on Mantle and what drove it.
We always see after a product release, a new product, we see a lot of people come in. So we always see a spike in engagement, but also gives us an opportunity to talk to an audience that's not using us and say, hey, we just launched this new thing. So I think we're trying to every 2 weeks to have a new product release. And sometimes it's something big. We just launched DMs. We launched a feature called groups. It's niche communities. Those things you can really see a spike. And sometimes it's like, we're gonna have one next week and it's that you can reorder the photos on when you post the way that we had originally built it. You just post and like you can't reorder the order that the photos post on your show up on your post. You couldn't reorder, and it was frustrating because sometimes you're like, oh, I actually wanted this one first. That one is not going to get us a huge spike, but it's just really important for us to always be like, hey, this is a little thing, but you've been asking for it, and we're going to give it to you. So I think product releases I have to be better about getting on LinkedIn and X to tell people when we have something new to make sure that they see it. So it's that, and anytime that we have a member of this community talk to their audience about us in a meaningful way and say, I use it, this is why I love it.
Love that. Number seven, tell me the story from the Athletic. So going back to your days at the Athletic, the story from the Athletic that's most memorable, or just the one that has stuck with you over the time.
I always loved the oral histories, and there was one I saw. The reason why it's in my mind is because I saw a Mike Leach interview over the weekend, a video interview, and the guy was always so funny. Jason Jenks wrote one about his QB meetings. If you haven't read, it's one of the funniest things that I've ever read in my entire life about how he ran his meetings with his players. Was really good. You know, I feel very lucky about my time at the Athletic. I still read it every day, and there aren't that many jobs that you leave, but you still, so love what the people are continuing to do after you're gone. And so Marcus Thompson and Katie Strang and Craig Custance and all these writers and Stephen Nesbitt who are still there, who are doing such great work. I have so many in my mind. I've got so many moments, articles while I was there, and since I left, even before I joined, that made such a huge impact on me as a sports fan and as somebody who just loves journalism.
That's great. Yeah, that Mike Leach one, I'm still like remembering. There's a scene where like Leach is just he's telling a story, but also flipping the play back and forth, like rewinding and fast forwarding, just while he's telling this like half
Yeah.
a long story. I'm just like picturing that. It's so great. I
Oh,
love it.
it's hilarious. Stuff about him, Zach Greinke, oral histories were always hilarious. Some of these athletes that like you just don't get to see enough of their personality when they're on the field, but somebody can kind of find a way to tell a story in a meaningful way and paint them in a whole totally different light.
Oh yeah. All right, number 8 coming down to the wire here with Evan Parker, CEO of Mantle. It's time for our food question. We always ask a food question. So tell me the best meal to get in the greater Los Angeles area and where to get it.
Yeah, I'm a sandwich guy. Langer's is a pastrami. The number 19 is pastrami on rye with coleslaw and Swiss cheese. I'm not a huge pastrami guy. I'm not a coleslaw guy at all, and I don't really like Swiss cheese. And it's, I think, the best sandwich in the world. And it's an old school Jewish deli that's existed there for 100 years. It closes at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's only open 6 days a week. It's a total pain in the ass to get to and to eat there, and you will leave saying that was amazing.
Cannot go wrong there. From this Jew can always give a thumbs up to pastrami. That's awesome.
There you go.
Number 9, tell me the social platform that performs the best for Mantle to drive traffic to Mantle, drive engagement around Mantle's content, and the platform you think has the most potential to grow as a source of whether referrals or just engagement overall.
Instagram's where we do the best by a wide margin. I think the stuff that we create is just visually interesting and gets people to stop and like and drop a comment. It doesn't convert that well. People don't like to leave Instagram and go to another link. And so while it does the best, I think in like helping us build our brand, it hasn't done as good of a job as growing our audience, our on Mantle audience as I'd like. I think that we need to get better at X because people are open to clicking links and leaving the platform, and I think it's a medium that's very similar to Mantle, and so there's some continuity there that I think we're trying to get better at. We're trying to be more present in replies and just engaging with people on things that are not even about us. Like, if there's a post about a cool card that has nothing to do with us, we need to be in there and say, hey, this is really cool. You should post it on Mantle, or hey, you would like this post that was about this sort of thing. And you need staff for that. It's really difficult, but we're trying to do more. Mike Metzler, who is on our team doing content and community, is very much online and knows that world really well. And so when he's got a couple of minutes, he'll scroll through Twitter and drop a comment and try to. It could be as simple as a GIF, but just something to make sure people know that we exist. So I think that has a lot of opportunity for us. I know YouTube has a ton of opportunity for us. It's a little bit harder to crack that code and more costly to create content for it. But that's an area that I know will be massive for us when we can really dedicate some time.
Good stuff there. And you read my mind. I was going to ask a follow up to talk about Mike and Mike Metzler and his growing role with Mantle. So I'm glad you got to touch on that.
Yeah.
All right, last one for you, Evan, to get you out of this might be the toughest question we ask you the whole time, though. If money and accessibility were no object, tell me the collector's item that you most want to own and the item that you actually do own that is your most favorite or proudest.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you ask me this 7 days out of the week, I'll give you seven answers. It's really tough. I think as a born and raised LA guy, as a guy who grew up as a huge UCLA fan, Dodger fan, I think old Jackie Robinson cards would be really special to own. His 48 Leaf card is pretty classic, and to have something like that in my collection would be very meaningful to own something My dad was born in 48. There's just some cool connections to it that I think I would love to have an old Jackie Robinson card like the 48 Leaf. In terms of the stuff that's most meaningful, I mean, I've got behind me the helmet from the 2017 Daytona 500 that was signed by every driver that entered the race, including Kurt Busch, who won it. I was working for the sport at the time. At the time, I was in the partnership side of the business, and Monster Energy was a partner that I managed that relationship. And so it was their first race. They were entitling this sport as the Monster Energy Cup Series at that point. Daytona 500, we got all the drivers to sign a bunch of helmets to give to the client, to give to the partner. I got to keep one. Kurt Busch, who was driving for Monster Energy, wins the Daytona 500. So it's this moment where you're like, you spent all this time selling them to become partners in the sport, getting the sport ready, all the work that had to be done to have them be the title sponsor and make this event go well. And then for the guy in victory lane to be the guy driving the Monster Energy car certainly created a bunch of people who thought that it was, conspiracy, that it was rigged. But for me, knowing that it wasn't rigged, I just saw that as like a huge moment of I can take a deep breath. This is something like we've done it. We've made it through the first race of the season, and that's a helmet that will be on my mantelpiece forever.
Absolutely love that, and love how it just showcases a perfect illustration of how it's a story starter. It's a story, and it's an opportunity
Absolutely.
to tell a story. And I love hearing that. All right,
Yeah.
Evan, you crushed the mantelpieces. Loved it. And now it's your chance to take over the podcast. Tell us your social media all-star to follow. It can be someone on social, it can be a blogger, a newsletter, it can be someone on Mantle or beyond. Just tell us who they are and why they're following.
If I could cheat, I've got two. I would say at Buster Buster on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. He's somebody who he oversees social media for us. He's a creator himself, really smart, understands the creator economy, and puts out a lot of really interesting content about how you can kind of create your own hobby, turn your hobby into a hustle. But he creates really good content about collectibles as well. So I would put him up there. And a woman named Casey Lewis writes a newsletter called After School. It's about Gen Z primarily, and I read it every single day because it's always interesting articles that she links to about a generation that I don't know as much about, but I know that they're important. I know that they're not only going to help shape my business, but they're going to help shape the world, and understanding what motivates them. There was a piece that she linked to from the New York Times about today. It was in her newsletter about at UNC. There's a whole program now to create influencers out of bench warmer and athletes that I thought was fascinating, and how Gen Z is impacting the economy, how Gen Z is impacting politics. Like you can't ignore it, even if you're not part of that generation. We can't just assume that, hey, I'm a millennial, then this is what matters. It's these kids growing up are the ones that are shaping sort of the way that this world is going to be, and I want to be prepared, and it's interesting.
Oh yeah, some great call outs there. I will definitely be subscribing to that newsletter. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, you
And how
love
about
it.
you, Evan? Where can we find all things you as well as all things Mantle across digital, social, mobile apps, etc.?
I always tell anybody if you want to follow anything I'm doing, follow Mantle. If you can only choose one thing to follow from this whole conversation, it's at on Mantle, OnMantel on all the social platforms. Our app is available in iOS and the Android App Store in 50 countries. So if you're watching this from the UK, from Japan, wherever, come find us. But we're at on Mantle on all the social platforms and put out really good content about things that I think people would find interesting, even if you're not a sports card collector or a collector yourself. Our newsletters, we've got Above the Mantle and Mail Day are really great human interest, like story specific newsletters that touch on collectibles, but we try to get to the story and the community behind them. I'm at Evan E. Parker on. I post on X. I post on LinkedIn. I don't really post on Instagram, but if you want to follow me, that's where you get me. But at On Mantle is where the real content comes out, and it's anything that I'm thinking that our teams are thinking about that we really think matters. That's where it always ends up.
So check out Mantle. I will pretty much 100% guarantee that you will find something thumb stopping, something that will stop make you go, "Whoa, that's interesting." Something
Exactly.
that you'll like to read about and check out and share with friends. So cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast today, talking about the collectible space, the fans that are driving it, and everything around it, and certainly building the platform of Mantle. And look forward to continuing to see it grow and thrive.
I appreciate it, Neil. This was a lot of fun, and thanks for helping to put the spotlight on our business.
Thanks so much again to Evan Parker, CEO of Mantle. Really enjoyed learning about everything they got going on with Mantle, really building it from scratch, from the ground up, and building this app, this platform, this network, this community. After be able to know Evan all these years, and now seeing what he's doing with Mantle is really thrilling, really exciting, and really just inspiring and exhilarating to be able to see it come together and continue to grow. Keep an eye on it. Download Mantle if you haven't already. Create an account. Scroll through. I will guarantee you find something that will stop your thumb and be interesting and to read about, to learn about, and to see. But that'll do for some sort of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening and downloading. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horwitz. Hit me up on Twitter, NJH287, on LinkedIn, where I post more content. Connect with me there. The website, dsmsports.net. The other website I'd love for you to check out, slyke.co, is a place to do crowdsourced content curation of examples, ideas, events, whatever it might be. Reddit, Wikipedia kind of trying to get it off the ground still as well. But more importantly, the podcast is always coming at you. Until next time, this is Neil Horwitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.